Raj, hello, hello, hello. Welcome. How you doing?
Hi. Am I supposed to pretend that we weren't just talking a lot?
Yeah, exactly. That's my intent.
I
Yeah,
mean, I think this
yeah.
is
No,
a
this is the
good.
first time. This is the first time we've talked since the listeners heard us talk last.
I mean, I think this is a good way, though, to sort of introduce that we're going to try something different.
Yeah, yeah. We're trying. What are we trying? We're trying maybe a little less, maybe a little looser format, and maybe taking some of the unscripted banter that we have and seeing where that takes us as a format for the show.
Yeah, one thing that we've talked
Here we
about
are.
a lot. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, one thing that we've talked about a lot is that all of our conversations that we have before we start recording tend to be the ones that where we go, we should have been recording this, and so we are
Yes.
trying that, and so it's gonna be a little less
Yes.
polished, but it's hopefully going to be more real content.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we were talking about, before we decided to like actually hit the record button and talk on the record about this idea of like identity and how when how the things that we do, the pursuits that we have, whether those be work or otherwise, require us to like to grow and become different versions of ourselves. And I don't know, it's a topic that I'm always interested in. I feel like the intersection of work and identity. But I think maybe a good entry point into this is how you've been wrestling with this with the book and maybe launching your author career. Coming out of the closet as an author. Tell me, where does that take you?
Yeah. You know, Donald Miller in his book A Hero on a Mission, he writes about how if you want to change your life, you have to just do something that starts a new story in your life. So, don't try to lose 10 pounds, sign up for a marathon. And that's 6 months
Mm,
away that you have to train for with hopefully with a
mm,
partner or a friend that, or for a good cause that, there's going to be somebody who's let down by you not doing this. And,
mhm.
um, I don't know about you, but I sort of hate it when other people are right. Um, like I I
Yes.
I I don't know why.
Depending who they are, actually. There's some people that have more permission to be right in my life than others.
That's fair, but I don't know. There's just something weird inside of me that when it's like even just really simple advice like if you eat right and exercise, you'll feel better, and it's like excuse me, I we'll see about that. And then it works perfectly. And it's like, oh, fine. I might just be a contrarian by nature. but,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, so with that, you know, uh, I started the book about 7 years ago and then wrote it for about 2 years, put it down because I didn't know what to do next with it. And so I think there's probably about a year gap in there. I hired a developmental editor, and her input was invaluable. And basically, the edit process lasted another about 18 months, another 2 years, and then the last 2 years I've spent trying to get it traditionally published. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I would have said at the time was one of the reasons I want to traditionally publish is that then I will know the book is done because
Hmm.
there's this validation process to if somebody else says it's good enough to put in front of other people, then I don't have to make that decision for myself.
Yep.
And because, like, this week, for example, you've been reading the book and you're more of an audiobook person than you are a physical book person. So you're going through it at a pace that's agonizingly slow. Uh, and
That's true. It's very true.
and so I've been looking into like using an AI voice generator to do just a rough copy of an audiobook, and then I'd love to hire a voice actor to legitimately do it later, but I don't want to hire a voice actor now if there's going to be any edits between now and the time we publish. And so just the act of listening to the book, I've been like, ugh, I should change that. And
Yes.
so for
Yes.
me, it's like every single step of this process, there are little edits, little tweaks, all of that that I would do. And that's true of all of my writing, websites, emails, everything that I write. If I look at it again, I go, oh, who put that there? It's almost like it was a different
Yep.
person,
Yep.
who did that,
Yep.
because you have fresh eyes, and that's a good thing, actually. And so the legitimacy of the publishing process is going like, hey, as many people as could feasibly possible to be looking at this have looked at it, and so now it's done. We're going to put it on paper. It is fixed in the world,
Yes.
and unless there's some glaring error that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to reprint all of these copies, this book is done. We need to move on.
Yep.
And so as you've been kind of pushing me towards self-publishing, and many other people have too, because there's so many good reasons to do that. You can get to market faster. You get more of your own royalties. You have more control over the rights of your book, and your own marketing, your own cover, even all of those things. There's so many reasons to do it, but one of the biggest downsides is that then I have to do the incredibly emotionally difficult work of saying, I'm happy with this and I'm ready for other people to see it. There's no external force saying, yeah, man, you're good. You've done as much work as you possibly could have
Mm,
done on this, and this is ready for the world, and this
mm.
lives up to this standard that everybody else has for a book. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much emotionally I had invested in that piece of
Mhm.
outsourcing my insecurity, essentially. Of just saying like,
Mhm.
hey, this they get to make that decision if it's good enough. I am
Yeah.
offloading, offboarding that problem from myself. I don't have to hire myself to do that again, and that
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
incredibly difficult emotionally.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's like ah okay, let me just find the words here. I think that there's another layer to that, which is not only are they in this scenario the ones who say that it's good enough, but the next layer is that if it's not, they're responsible. Um, and so I feel
Yeah,
like there's kind of like
yeah,
these two layers of self protection that you're having to wrestle with of like one is the validation, but then two is like the fear of criticism, that both of them would be like, well, you know yeah, my editor said I should do it that way, so so that's how, or the publisher wanted it this way or that way, and so that's why it's this way or that way. And so it's just all of it is just pointing to the fact that like you're more on the hook
yeah.
than you want to be, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, because it's experts, right? It's like, well, these are the people who put out, John Green's books, or these are the people who put out, the book that got picked by Reese Witherspoon for her book club. And so if they screwed up, I mean, that's on them, like if
Yeah.
we suck, we
Yeah.
suck together. And, the alternative being when you self publish, I have hired professionals, nobody who has a bestseller so far, but hired professionals who have worked on books that have gone to market. However, a lot of the qualitative judgments about, for one, is this a story that needs to be put out in the world, and then for another, is this good enough to the standard of a book that people should pay for?
Hmm.
A lot of those
Hmm.
qualitative judgments either fall on me or my friends and family. And if you think about
Yeah.
um, the implication there of, uh, hey, I want to put this out in the world. Do you think this is good enough? And I really need you to be honest with me. Then,
Hmm.
now all of a sudden you're asking, is my wife, are my friends, are my coworkers honest enough with me? Do they think they can be honest enough with me? What does it say about me if they don't feel
Yes.
like they can? Or also,
Mhm.
do I just have a bunch of people in my life who have poor taste? And if they have poor taste, what do they see in me? Like it goes so deep that, like you said, is that
Yeah.
putting putting this on the publisher and saying, "Hey, you're professionals in this, and if you screw this up, well, bad day at work for you." But as opposed
Yeah.
to everybody in my life might be lying to me because I'm too fragile of a person to hear the truth, or
Mm,
everybody in my
mm.
life is somehow a simpleton who can't tell a good book from a bad book. And there's like not a lot of good options there. It doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes. Yeah. And I think that there's this, I don't know, I guess I wanna talk about, like, what it means to have to level up the way you are entering the world in order to do the things that you wanna do, to do this big thing that you've been working towards for a long time.
Yeah. Um, Writing the book was leveling up in its own way because you, I'm somebody who can get away with a first draft on a lot of things. Um, I have written things for powerful people that was more or less my first draft, and uh, like
Are you bragging right now?
some of my work has appeared in front of like congressional sessions, and I don't remember if that was first draft or second draft, but I know it wasn't third.
Yeah,
And
early
uh,
draft, early draft.
yeah, and part of it's just mastery of something that I've been working on
Yeah.
for 20 years since high school, sort of thing. And
Mm,
and so that just writing a book alone has been a leveling up exercise of okay, the first draft is out, now I have to make it clear, now I have to answer people's questions that they might have had. And so hiring an
mm,
editor was really big in that. And then also, how emotionally honest am I willing to be in this book? One of my
mm,
friends who read the book, there, as we've talked about, the book centers on this couple who met in grief counseling when they were children, and they grow up, they fall in love, they get married, and then there's this, sort of this wonder and the suspicion of can their marriage survive their tragic upbringing? It can, as
mm,
hard as marriage is, can two people look at each other every day and not wonder in the back of their mind if they're going to lose each other the same way that they lost their parent? And
yeah.
so there's some heavy themes in there. You've read the book, or at least part of it, slowly, but you know, I'm just gonna give you garbage the whole time.
You're just gonna keep just to make sure that I get
Yep,
it
just
done. I
needling
love
it.
it. I love it.
Yep.
Just keep poking at it.
um, but so there's heavy themes in the book, but it's not a heavy read. There's a lot of humor in it, and but one of my friends who read it said, "How did you get depression so right in the book?"
Mm,
And
mm,
it was like, well, because I let my mind go there. I let myself be in the shoes of someone that felt such intense psychological pain that it felt like not existing at all would be less painful than continuing to
mm,
to exist. And
mm,
and I think that if we're honest, we all have had moments like that in our lives where we maybe don't certainly don't seriously consider anything like that, but do wonder, when is it going to stop hurting? How where we the pain is so intense that we just wonder, like, am I going to survive this? And
mm.
so just writing the book alone was a huge kind of leveling up in emotional honesty. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I was kind of processing the previous 10 years of my life where our marriage started with losing a close family member in the first year of our marriage. I had 7 jobs in 10 years. From the time that I left college to the time that I started working at Fruitful, and we lost 2 babies to miscarriage before we ended up having our 3 who were
Mm.
healthy, and just thing after thing after thing. Even having kids, we had 3 kids in 37 months, which is so fast, and your life changes so much, and especially in the middle of job changes. And our middle daughter was 10 days old when I got appendicitis, and that was in the same year that I had gallstones, and so I had my gallbladder and my
Mm.
appendix out. I think it was exactly 5 months apart, and so I
Oh,
was
jeez.
physically in pain as well. And so writing this book required just this level of emotional honesty. Then I get to
Mm.
done or close to done, whatever that point is, and go, okay, I'm going to start putting it out there in the world. Have received, 25 plus rejections from traditional publishers, well, agents, not even from the publishers themselves. And most of those, by the way, are not no's. They are
Mm.
no answers. It's ghosting. And so
Yeah.
it's,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
um, and so it's like, hey, I wrote about my life, and or not about my life, but I processed, some of the big questions that I've been asking about life for the last 10 years. I've been writing it for 5, 6 years now, and I want to share this with people, and it's literally no response from the people
Yeah.
who keep the gates between you and the
Yeah.
and the rest of the world, and that
Yep.
feels very demoralizing. It feels
Mhm.
personal and insulting, even though I know it's just so the volume of things that are being pushed to these people that they can't respond to everything. But I think it's also a goofy system that kind of dehumanizes people in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And now, once again, you're in order to take the next step, you've got to put on your big boy pants and do some scary stuff and yeah, stand up, I don't know, advocate for yourself in ways that like are uncomfortable, um ask people to do things for you that is uncomfortable, to talk about, to promote, to share your work and their networks, all of these things. I just feel like there's something here about like what you're doing is what we're all doing when we're doing life, in my opinion, doing life right. Like that
Yeah,
this is what progress looks like as a person.
yeah. In business, in my professional life, I kind of pride myself on being really generous with other people. Part of how you and I started talking a lot was I knew how to fix a problem that you were experiencing, or at least I knew what it was like,
Mhm.
and could walk through it with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and I do this all the time. I mean, probably close to once a week, if not more. It's somebody who's trying to start a creative business who's reaching out to me, or an intern or a young person who's trying to get into the creative industry, or somebody who is a peer who's like, hey, have you ever experienced this problem? And so I'm so happy to give and give and give, in part because of how many people have given to me to help me get to the point that I am. And yet, and I don't know if it's because it's Zoom or just what it is, but I remember a couple of years ago I was having a conversation with my wife where when I think about the number of people that I have like close conversations with on any given week, I I told her, I was like, I think that if I died, I don't think that many people would come to the funeral.
Hmm.
Which I know is a little dark. I hope you're enjoying your drive or whatever you're doing on your way. Yeah. um, but the thought was like, we had left our church because I've experienced a major kind of change in faith, and so sort of the extended community that you have when hundreds of people see you playing guitar in the worship band, or 20 people hear you teach a lesson or whatever. You just have this bigger sense of community. And most of
Yeah.
my life now, even though I deal with a lot of people, they're spread all over the country. And I don't think that my clients, most of them
Hmm.
necessarily would be like, "Oh my gosh, he died. Let's fly in for the funeral." I think maybe a
Mm.
couple would, but instead it'd be flowers and gifts and whatever. And then there'd be like, my immediate family, and then a handful of friends. That's what it felt like at that time a
Yeah.
couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And and so there is this weird sense by which you kind of just when putting something out in the world, where now I need to mobilize a bunch of people to help me spread the word about it.
Hmm.
It feels like starting from zero. And
Yeah.
I'm starting to realize that it's not that, but I think it
Hmm.
honestly kind of says more about my internals than it does about my relationships with people.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
that it's really easy for me to default to. I mean, I'm literally in a room by myself right now. I'm talking to you, but I'm in a room by
Hmm.
myself, and it's where I've
Yep.
been for most of the day today. And so it's
Hmm.
hard for my brain to like wrap around like who's really here for me, because I've never
Yeah.
asked really. This is the first time I've been I've been giving and giving and giving to people for the last 10, 20 years, and not often asking anything in return, in part because I don't want to. Like, I would rather
Yeah.
be the giver in a scenario than someone who's receiving, and that is really
Yeah.
really difficult for me to just like you know open myself up to
Yeah.
saying that I need help from other people.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things in there that feel important to point out. Is one is like how like you have to. It's forcing you to hold a hypothesis and maybe a counter narrative to the narrative that like I don't have anyone that cares enough to like say, okay, maybe I do, or at least I'm going to move forward as if I do, and
Mhm.
see what happens. And so it's almost like and what's cool about this is what I just love about doing things like what you're doing. This is what I get also so jazzed up about creative projects in general, and about like the way that the things that we do when we have something, a dream we're trying to realize in the world, um, that like on the other side of this, so we fast forward a year from now and it's done and it's out there and it's successful. Now you have a new story about what it looks like to make a book, to ask people to be, involved in what you're doing. And you also have a template for the next one and the next one and the next thing that comes after that. And so just like, raises up again, like raises up a level of like, oh, I can do that. I've done this before. But right now we're at this lower level where it's like, ooh, this is a
Mhm.
lift. I don't know if it's going to work. I have to fight against a lot of voices in my head that are telling me that it might not. And that's scary and hard work that I think everyone listening, if we're honest with ourselves, can identify with. And I think it's also why a lot of people wouldn't do the crazy kind of thing that you're trying to do right now because it's too scary. And so I applaud your courage, because it's
Thank you.
hard work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
um I've been talking to a couple of personal branding experts because of this problem of because one of my problems is that I love being on podcasts. I love having conversations like this. I hate making Instagram videos. Like, I literally putting a phone in front of myself and asking the world to pay attention is so painful for me. And I was trying to sort of
Yes.
understand this, and it's like, is it just that I don't know what to talk about, or because you and I kind of joke often about sort of the indifference of the universe or the internet. You
Mhm,
put this stuff out
mhm.
there that you work so hard on, and then you get like 2 likes or 0 likes or
Mhm.
whatever,
Yep,
and it's like, why?
yep.
Why should I keep going? And so I've been talking to these folks about the yeah, I've been talking to them about personal branding, and it's like, okay, what am I trying to put out there? How am I going to get responses? And both of them is Julie Stroud and Tammy Enfield. They're both great story brand guides who focus on personal branding, and they both of them have uh, have said like, hey, you need to think about what you were just talking about. Of fast forward a year in the future, you're getting emails and
Mhm.
DMs from people who are
Yeah,
uh, who've read your book and have a grief story of their own and need somebody to share it with, or just want to say how encouraged and motivated they are by the story that unfolds and how seen they feel. And one thing that was challenging for me in both those conversations was to believe that that will happen, even. Um,
mhm, mhm.
and because
Hmm.
again, just it can feel so like the world can feel so cold and so indifferent when you put stuff out there and
Yep,
nobody pays attention.
yes.
And so it's just like, well, I don't know if that happens is sort of the thing. But the challenge
Mm.
there is in thinking, well, why are you doing this if you don't believe that this is going to happen? Like,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
believe that the book is good enough to elicit that reaction? It's like, I've been working on it for 7 years. Of course, I believe it's good enough to elicit that
Mhm,
reaction. But it's more the algorithm and all those things, that I kind of hide behind and say like,
mhm.
well, but if people will buy it and if it will get seen and if people pay attention and actually read it and all those things, there's just these like kind of self-defeating narratives that I have. Um,
Mhm,
and one of the things that I've been uncovering is that I was talking with Tammy Enfield about this, and I said that part of it is because I'm the son of an immigrant, and
mhm.
and so like most of my life has not been surrounded by like huge family. I don't have this like huge built-in support network where it's like,
Yep.
oh, parents are going out of town. You stay at the aunts and uncles this week, or we're having a wedding. Oh, it's going to be a huge affair because we got to invite all the aunts and uncles. And it's like literally half of my family lives on a different continent, and I've met them a couple of times in
Yeah.
person, and this is way before Zoom and even Skype and all those things. So back when you had to pay, I think it was like 50 cents a minute to talk on the phone to these people. And so it better be a good
Mm.
conversation to even talk for 10 minutes.
Yes.
And there was a delay, and it's like older relatives who are hard of hearing, and just like all it, just it was hard to build a relationship with them except for when we were in person. And then on my mom's side of the family, unfortunately, there was a lot of dysfunction and stuff, and so we didn't have a great relationship with that side of the family either, even though several of them lived closer. And so there was just this sort of sense of living on an island, even though we're in a city surrounded
Mhm,
by almost 1 million people. Um, there didn't feel like there were that many people that we could count on in our lives,
mm.
and so I think that has a lot to do with the way that I've been seeing this launch. Is that like
Yeah.
is this just confirming the hypothesis that I've had that
Mhm.
really there is no one there? And
Yeah.
thankfully, what I'm finding is that quite the opposite is true. That not
Mm.
only have I invested a lot in the lives of other people, but even people that I haven't um, are rallying around the idea of it.
Yeah.
We just this week, so I think we talked about it in the last episode. The when with launching this book, I'm going to be donating all of the royalties from the pre-sales to the Sharing Place, which is the actual nonprofit that my book, The Caring House, is based on. And just this week, we had a donor commit to matching those donations to the Sharing Place for all
So
the
cool.
books that are sold before it launches. And the crazy thing is, I literally didn't even ask. I just told her
Mm.
about what I was doing. And before I was even done talking, she goes, "We'll be your match." And I think a lot of it has to
So
do with the
cool.
quality of the sharing place. But I looked at her. I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, such a great cause." And
Hmm.
it just, I felt like the Grinch. It made my heart just like one size bigger. Like, okay, maybe the world is not as cold and indifferent as I have maybe judged it to be unfairly.
Mm, yeah. Well, I love that, like, that idea of, like, you hold two hypotheses, right? And, like, one is that people care and people don't care, and, like, we're gonna put a bet here that people do care, and like, that's some of the big question, it feels like, for you right now in this. um and I just love, framing it that way, that, like, um yeah, you're making a bet, and the only way to find, which, what is real here, is to follow through, and try to tell yourself a new story about the world.
You know what's
Does that resonate? Does that
hor
feel right?
it yeah, where it takes me, which is ironic, and makes me feel gross, is, uh, um, that so in the book, Gabe is the main character. It's told from his point of view, and he, it's not autobiographical, but he definitely struggles with this sense that sort of the universe is against him. Where he lost his
Yep.
dad when he was 7, and he married someone who lost her dad when she was 7, and there's sort of this just like, we're gonna cling to each other and try to skate through this thing, like try to get through it
Yeah.
unscathed.
Mm,
And then when life throws them another curveball, they lose another family member. He's kind of thrown into this spiral. Like, it's almost like, see, I knew it. Like, I knew that life really
mm,
was this hard, this bad, and so he kind of spirals, and and then there's a lot of help that he finds in the most unusual places or unexpected places. And I think in a lot of ways, some of that was me writing what I hope happens in the world, and I think what
yeah.
also that I've all experienced happens in the world, and
Yeah.
what I want for more people to experience and share their experience with, because
Yeah.
we love those stories. We somebody was just telling me a story of their dog the other day, even that had a medical condition that ended up being the exact same medical condition that their daughter had 7 years later, and that they wouldn't have thought to,
Wild.
they wouldn't have thought to consider that diagnosis were it not for the fact that 7 years before that the dog had the same thing. And it's like, we need
Yeah.
these stories that help us just believe that, like, no, if we can make it, that the universe is not as cold and indifferent to us being here as it feels like sometimes. So I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. It's
I
like,
love it.
there's these
Yeah.
two different ways to see the world. It's like, people don't care, people do care, and a
Yes.
lot of how you experience the world is based on just which one you choose to see.
Yes. Well, what that makes you just think of is, like, we take these leaps in our lives when it's like, we I guess I talked about it as a bet. Now I'm talking about it as a leap. So I'm changing metaphors here, but, like, it's another way to talk about the same thing. Like, because it is like this, like, you're just having to jump, and you think that there's the people there that are going to catch you, right? And then that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing. Like, and you're hoping that they're there, and you're having to fight against the other story that they're not there. Um, I don't know. And I feel like I'm doing something similar, that we haven't talked about, on the podcast, but I think that I think could be interesting. Of, like, I'm in this shift professionally where
Yeah.
I'm having to set down a lot of where I've been, and I mean, the big question for me is, like, is Dan employable? That's like one of them, is like, can I actually, find a new income stream? And like, uh, I don't know. I feel like there's this piece of growth that we're both going through that I think everybody goes through, where you have to like set down some part of a narrative in order to create the space for, like you said, like um, a story to help you believe in something new about yourself and about the
Yeah.
world. And yeah, I just love that.
Yeah, and with you, addressing that question of are you employable? Yes, very much so. And I've worked with you in professional capacities before too, and um, and part of it with you is it's not are you employable? It's for which skill set are you employable because you have
Yeah.
so many.
Yeah. Yes,
Eh,
yes. Well, and I think yeah, and I think that that's it. Is it's like so what I'm trying to do, just to put it on the table, is like I'm trying to get a job in product. I'm trying to find a role in product at a software company. That's something that I have done for my own ventures. I've built a lot of software. I but but it's so often it has felt like I'm a square peg in a round hole trying to make myself fit. And the question, I guess, is that like, can I actually do this? And there's a whole lot of reasons of why this is the right choice for me right now. One of which is for family and for kids and finances. Um, that but I hold the keep coming back to this question as I've been in this search. And when you're talking about putting out your applying to or reaching out to publishers and not hearing back, it just felt so similar to the process that I've been in of putting myself
yeah,
out there and not hearing back, or instantly hearing back negatively, like, oh well, I guess that didn't make it through their automated rejection machine. um but the question, yeah, is like, is this process at the other, fast forward a year from now, will this be a successful endeavor, or am I gonna hit a eventually just be like, okay, I've sent out enough applications, and it's time for me to do it a different way. um Talked to enough people, tried to network my way into this enough, and it's time to find a different path. But I'm not uh willing to say that until I test this hypothesis, till I take this bet that, like, I think it's possible, but I just don't know until we get there.
yeah. Well, and so it's funny because it's so much easier to solve when you're looking at another person's version of it because
Oh yeah,
like with
100%.
you, you just totally glossed over, I've built a lot of software and I'd heard you say that a bunch of times. And, being your friend, I know, some of the drama that happens behind the scenes at software companies and how deals are structured and kind of all these things that
Yeah.
are, the kinds of things that end up being they make stories like, the we work or we crashed or, all that kind of stuff about it was like just but on a much smaller scale where people stab each other in the back or they don't recognize the contribution that one person has made. And this is like The Social
Mm,
Network was similar. It's
mm.
like we see
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
movies where this stuff happens and it happens on so much smaller scales too. And so I think when you talk about like square peg in a round hole, even just that language, if there's anybody listening who has a software product job available, they're like, oh well, I don't know if he's going to fit in around here. And it's like, well, where Dan doesn't fit is abusive environments or environments that don't,
Mm, mm.
recognize his contribution. Or I will say too that I mean I think that you would be incredible in an established team that actually is ready to value your contribution rather than
Yeah,
necessarily a startup that isn't willing to either isn't willing to listen or is totally willing to listen but for no pay. It's like, oh, we'll
yeah.
see you on the upside, and it's like, but with no
Yes,
paperwork.
yes,
And I was like, okay, let's not do
yes.
that. And because I
It's
mean in
just for
terms of
the listener's sake, Raj is talking about some very specific, very specific moments in my last few months here.
But even
I
I
love it.
mean, but this
Continue.
is true. This is true of everybody, though. I mean, working in
Yeah,
marketing, there's so many people who would love for you to work for exposure, and photography is the same
yeah,
way. And
totally, totally.
so feeling like you don't fit in the industry, it's because there are always, no matter which industry it is, there's always so many people who would love for you to work for free.
Yeah,
Even folks that I need favors from right now. It's like I know how much it
Yeah.
sucks for me to have to ask for favors because I'm not your typical client, but I need your level of skill. And part of it is
Yes.
thankfully
That's
I've
right.
spent the last 10 years doing a lot of favors for people, and I have a few to call in,
Hmm.
but I don't, they're not
Yes.
unlimited. I still
Yeah.
have to pay for some things, and I still, and I know why I should. But I also have that
Yes.
tension of like my publishing career is a startup as well, and so
Yeah.
I have that
Great
tension. It's either
framing.
bootstrap it myself or have somebody have somebody do me a
Yeah.
solid. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I keep circling around in my mind is this idea that like in in the circles I run in, the books I read, the people I follow on Twitter or X, it's so popular to say bet on yourself, and that's in some ways that's what you and I are both doing in some
Yeah.
regard. Um, but I feel like there's like this other layer of like what does that mean to bet on yourself? Because you could argue that I'm not betting on myself right now, right? Like I'm kind of going from running my own entrepreneurial ventures to potentially joining someone else's. I'm going the wrong direction here, uh, but I think like the reframe that I feel is coming up in this conversation is like betting on the story that you want to be true.
Right.
Um, and it feels like it's a version of betting on yourself. But I'm just curious for people listening. I kind of want to know like what are the stories that they're betting on? What are people
Yeah.
what are the things that you want to be true in your life, in your work, in the world, um that you want to take a bet on? i'd
Yeah.
i'd be curious to hear.
Well, and I'd also be curious. That book that I referenced, Hero on a Mission, that Donald Miller wrote. He talks about how you start with your own dream, and so it's easy when it's Dan, software guy. And it's like, well, I mean, Microsoft is the dream, or whatever thing that goes meteoric, and yes, I'll
Yeah.
take that. I remember growing up, one of the like coolest things, like Bill Gates' driveway is heated so he doesn't have to scoop snow. It's like that's the goal, is like sell enough software for the heated driveway. You can tell I grew up in the Midwest, and
Yes.
um, and so it's like that seems obvious, but at the same time, it took a lot of sacrifice of like sleeping in the office and not having much of a personal life, and and even now later in life, their marriage falling apart, and those things,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all very very big sacrifices for that kind of meteoric success, and it's only success in that one
Yes.
particular area. And Don talks
Yes.
about when you have a family, you learn to dream with other people, and so it's
Mm.
not my dream or my wife's dream or even my kids' dream, but it's
Hmm.
our dream
Yes.
together. And
Yeah.
there's going to be
Yes.
some compromise involved in that. And so I
That's
think
absolutely
instead of
true.
kind of like this straight up, one of the things I probably don't like about the software world of the entrepreneurship world is this bet on yourself. And it's like, yeah, sort of, but it's like it's almost more like betting on us, betting on our
Yeah.
family, and so that might mean not making that bet on myself, and like betting the
That's
house
right.
literally sometimes
Yeah.
on this dream, because it's not the right
Hmm.
thing to do, especially not, and
Yeah.
maybe just not the right thing to do in this season.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the season I'm in, right? Like I have three kids that have growing needs and needing more support from professionals that I have, the appointments we're paying for the learning needs of my family are
Yeah.
equate to a whole nother mortgage. And
Yeah.
we live in a small house and we need a bigger house. And it's like, yeah, if it was just me, I don't know that I would be taking this bet in this way. I don't know that I would be moving this direction. But because it's more than just my dreams that are at stake here. it's the right thing. It's the right thing for me. It's the right thing for my family.
And a
Um,
company would be lucky to have someone who's talented enough to run their own thing, but is
yeah.
motivated by the needs of other people who count on him to
Mhm.
come work for them. Because
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
person's not going to be flighty. That person's not going to go,
Yeah.
"I'm better than this place. I need to get up and go." That person
Yeah.
is going to go, "I'm going to give everything I've got because there are people counting on me." And that brings
Yeah.
meaning to your work, that maybe even if
Yep.
you're not, passionate about, cafeteria management software or something, you become
Yeah.
passionate about it because
Mhm.
it's, of what it does in your story and your
That's
family.
100% right.
And
That's
and
100% right.
any company would be lucky to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Um and for any companies listening, you can you can reach me
Es-
at uh but I
Especially
think
in the
like where that
cafeteria
ties you back
management
to,
space.
yeah, cafeteria management software. I will build your cafeteria management software platform. Uh well, it's just like it's just, just the connection between how we find meaning in our work, and that's an ever, in my opinion, ever evolving thing. That different phases of our lives, where there's going to be different aspects of work that are meaningful
Yeah.
to us for different reasons,
Which is
and
really
a real
just part of the bigger
yeah
conversation of how we find meaning in our life, you know? Like,
yeah hmm
to your point about like learning needs, and my kids have learning needs as well. Um, you know, when you marry your wife, you think that you're in a love story, and then
yeah
when you have kids, you might think that you're in a in a sitcom almost, but then
yeah
when
yeah
you when they have needs, then that's your
yeah
chance to become a hero in their lives, where they,
mhm,
because the opposite is, oh, dad wasn't aware of my needs, and so I had to fake
yeah
it my whole life until I could take care of myself.
mm,
But instead, you get,
yeah
dad worked really hard to make sure that my needs were being taken care of,
yeah
um, and that's huge. But it's not
yes,
the story that you thought you were in when you started.
that's so true. That is so true. Yeah, and the story has to change, because again,
Yeah,
this kind of maybe even brings us full circle, like, because we change, right? And because we're
yeah,
always ever evolving in our work and who we are in the world and what we're trying to do next. And
yeah.
sometimes that's by choice, and sometimes it's not by choice. Sometimes we we have kids because we want the sitcom, and then we end up in a drama,
Yeah,
and that's just how it goes.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's the hard thing
yeah.
is that, I mean, like, I in my book, so Gabe and Jenny, they get married, and then, like, for them, I'm sure it felt like, "Hey, just surviving this life would be good enough." And then to lose
Yeah.
another family member, it was just like, "Oh, come on." Like,
Mm,
it feels like it
mm,
throws this huge wrench in it. But literally,
yep.
this story would not exist were it not for that. In fact,
Yeah.
I knew when I wrote the book, I knew the first scene and I knew how the book was going to end, and I didn't
Mm,
know what caused that first scene to happen, like why they were thrown into the middle of a story worth telling. Because
yeah.
honestly, had they had something bad happen to them early in their life, they grow up, fall in love, and get married, and it works out perfectly,
Mm,
it's not a story worth telling,
yeah.
in that way. I would have had to start
Yes.
when they were children, happy life. Oh my gosh, this bad horrible thing happens, and then you get the love story after that. But that's not the story. I knew that
Yes.
wasn't the story I was telling, because the story I was telling
Mm,
was: is it possible to have the bad thing happen, grow up, think that you're safe, and then have the other bad thing happen and go, oh my gosh,
yeah.
which world are we living in? Are we living in a world
Mm,
where we can only expect pain? Or are we living in a world where we can expect hope and joy? And
yeah.
and
Mm,
because that's the story that I needed, myself. I was like,
yep.
I needed to know
Yeah.
if it was going to be another 10 years of seven more jobs and not three more kids because we weren't going to do that, but but 10 more jobs and like literally having organs taken out of my body and just
Mm,
pain and sadness and leaving communities and all of those things, or were the next 10 years going to give me hope? And
yeah.
and I knew what kind of book I wasn't writing. I'm not going to give away too
Mm,
much, but I knew that I was writing the book that I needed, and because I
yeah.
didn't want it to just be like, nope, it's all pretty bleak. Bye. Like it was too much. Um,
Yeah.
but there is this process of like learning to believe that, and
Mhm.
and like you said, kind of like choosing to see the world through that lens, and it's really really hard to do that when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think that um it just brings me back to like the story that you're writing now of like, launching this book and like that story is a yeah, I'm trying to find the parallel of like what's the book that's about this story? The book is going to get
Yeah,
meta. The book that's about about the story about the guy who's trying to launch the book that he wrote that was the book that he needed at that time, right? Um,
yeah.
but
Well,
I think
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
to speak to that. The reason why this season is hard, the launching of the book season is hard, is that the 5 years of analyzing and considering the 10 years before that of 7 jobs and 3 kids and loss and all those things, that was it was work that I could do by myself, and it was
Mm,
work that
hmm.
that I could polish and obsess over and sit in coffee shops and listen to music, and like I could
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
and now I'm entering this completely other realm where I have to talk about it, and I have to
Yes.
convince people that this story would be good for them to read. And so it's like it's a literally completely different skill set. And so nothing
Mm,
that I did to get good at what
yes.
I was doing is transferable to this. And that's part of what's so hard
100%.
about this, is that like
Yeah.
I and now it's like, okay, but if you want to get to Mordor, if you want to whatever, everything that you learned from in the first half of this movie or the first movie of this trilogy or
Mm,
however you want to look at it
mm,
is not applicable here. You have to learn how to fight, or
yes.
you have to learn how to raise up an army or whatever.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, I was literally never prepared for this. In fact,
Yeah.
literally my entire life has been training in the opposite direction. It's been be humble
That's
and
exactly
quiet.
right.
I mean, if you look at Asian communities, Indian communities, it's not the people who are loud who are revered. it's
Mhm.
it's the people who are
Mhm.
quiet. They call them gurus. They call them teachers, and they grow
Mhm.
long beards and they speak quietly, and people listen.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
my example of like somebody who's to be revered. So having to like
Mhm.
do this thing that feels really embarrassing and exposing, to be like, hey, I did this thing for you, please read it, feels so,
Mhm.
I mean, literally feels anathema to me of what I should be as a person. But I also know that
Yeah.
I don't have the possibility of anybody getting what I made for them if I don't
Yeah.
do this. And that is
Oh, man.
really hard.
Yes. Yes. And it's exactly like, uh, so much similar to again, to the shift that I'm in, right? Like, all the skills that I have developed have nothing to do with the skills that it takes to do an interview and, like, to convince a hiring manager to hire you. Like, you know you're trying to get someone to you're trying to get the exposure you need to get someone to read your book. I'm trying to get the exposure I need to get someone to bring me onto their team. And those are completely, the work itself of doing the work, whether it's building software or writing a book, is completely different than the work it takes to get people to engage with those, what that skill set produces.
Yeah, and what sucks is
It's
that,
wild.
like, as a company owner, one of the things I'm most wary of is that there are people who interview really well and are bad at the job.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then there are
Yeah.
people who interview poorly and are would be the right fit for the job. And so
Yeah, right.
we have all of
It's
our little
terrifying.
tests and assessments and all those things to try to sniff that out. But it's so,
Yep.
so hard, especially when the mechanism that happens in those interviews is somebody buttering you up. Oh, I really want to work here. I'd be amazing. You have such a great company and
Mm,
all that.
mm,
And
mm.
it does not matter how selfless, how like low ego you think you are. Everybody wants to hear this. Everybody wants that affirmation. They want that validation, even from the people they're trying to
Yes.
hire. And
Yes.
uh, and somebody and so it's like just whole other skill set where people who are really winsome, not saying you're not, but like people who have the gift of woo, according to StrengthsFinder or whatever, they're
Mhm.
going to be better at
Mhm.
interviewing, but that may have zero
Yep.
to do with whether or not they'd be good at the job.
Yes, yes. And also it takes a different skill set to write a good book than to grow a social media platform, right? And
A
like
hundred
just
percent.
before we hit
Yep.
record, we were talking about, some social media, TikTok stars that have, hundreds of thousands of followers, and then other authors that are, creating life-changing work who don't have anything, pales in comparison. And
Yeah,
it's
or
just, again,
twenty
it's the
percent of the
exact
size.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's the exact same thing. And yet, if the TikTok star writes a book, it's going to sell a bunch, even though the work itself might not,
Yeah.
might not have much substance.
Yeah, or
Yeah. So
the
how do you
author
do
with a
both?
much smaller following is ghostwriting it for them, so it's actually good,
Yes, yeah, maybe that's the right way to do it. Oh
Yeah.
man. Well, I need to we need to wrap up here. But I want to kind of circle back to this question for our listeners, because like we're talking about the transitions that we're in, this space of, finding again, I've used so many metaphors, and the bets we want to take, the stories we want to create, the next level versions of ourselves. Um, and I would just love to hear from anyone listening. The transition that you're in, the bet that you're taking, the what's the hypothesis that you're testing in your life, whether it be, a career change, whether it be a creative project, whether it be something else, a relationship, I don't know. But I'd love to hear from you. So
Yeah,
shoot us an
and
email, podcast at the Meaning Movement, and tell us about it.
yeah, and what help do you need? I would love to know.
Yeah. Mm,
We're somewhat well connected. Like we might know the person that you
yeah.
need to meet.
I love that. I
So
love
tell us
that.
what your dream is and what you need.
Yeah. Perfect. I look forward to reading those emails. And
Yeah.
Raj, as always, this was great.
Thanks, Dan.